Perhaps one of the earliest examples of the angel of death murderers in the United States is the case of Jane Toppan. Born in Massachusetts in 1854 as Honora A. Kelly, Toppan lost her mother to an illness and her father to an insane asylum within a period of just 4 years. At the age of 5, Jane was adopted by the Toppan family and lived a seemingly stable life. With her dark hair and brown eyes, Toppan's adopted family made it a point to hide her Irish heritage, as being Irish at the time was not particularly acceptable. Jane's adopted mother instilled a hatred for Jane's heritage at an early age. Jane excelled in school and exhibited good social skills, albeit was known to tell exaggerated and outright lies about herself. At home, Jane was treated as a servant in the household and was never fully accepted as one of the Toppan family members. At the age of 18, Toppan was relieved of her adopted family's forced servitude and received $50 from them. After this, Jane continued to work for the Toppan family on the basis that she could live at the family home. When her adopted mother died, her daughter, Elizabeth Toppan, took over the household and treated Jane with more kindness and respect. So much so, when Jane eventually left the family home, Elizabeth assured Jane that she could always return to the home. While in her 20s, Jane was known to act bizarrely and attempted suicide twice. This, however, changed when she was accepted into a nursing school in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1887 at age 33. Like her early school years, Jane excelled in nursing school in spite of 7-day work weeks, grueling living conditions, demanding work hours, and strict conformity regulations that can result in unfavorable student reports. Jane continued to tell exaggerated stories about herself in the company of other nurses, earning her the nickname Jolly Jane and the resentment of her fellow students. Patients, while in the care of Jane, would meet one of two outcomes. If Jane liked one of her patients, she would alter their medical files or intentionally give them an overdose of morphine to prolong their stay. If she did not like one of her patients, they would die with little to no explanation. Other nursing students would later recall Jane saying, "There was no use in keeping old people alive." Jane experimented with combinations of drugs such as morphine and atropine. Atropine causes pupils to dilate with an increase in heart rate. Jane would inject morphine in the patient, sending them into a medically induced coma, and then revive the patient with atropine, causing death. Toppan was said to look into her dying patient's eyes with delirious enjoyment and often experimented with different doses of drugs to study their effects. She also had much literature pertaining to forensic investigations in her possession. Only one patient is known to have survived an attack by Toppan, whose attempt was cut short when a fellow nurse found Jane on top of the patient. The intended victim did not report her experience to hospital staff until years after Jane was arrested. Because Jane's murderous acts did not particularly raise suspicion at the time, and because they could not otherwise be proven, Jane left the nursing school with high recommendations from her supervisors and went on to pursue other nursing jobs. After sporadic employment, Jane became a private nurse and continued to murder people in her care, namely older patients, stealing belongings as trophies after she had done so. Throughout this time, Jane would often visit her sister, Elizabeth. In 1899, Jane invited her sister for a small picnic trip away from home. On this trip, Elizabeth fell seriously ill and died shortly after. Jane later admitted that she wanted to exact revenge on her sister, despite being treated kindly by her. Jane intentionally prolonged Elizabeth's death and took the time to torture her. In 1901, debts owed by Jane became apparent, so Jane murdered the family of the lenders, the Davises, wiping out the family entirely. Jane was also interested in marrying her late sister's husband. When Jane went to visit the widower, his older sister was in attendance, and, despite planning on leaving in a few days and not being a romantic rival, Jane killed her as well. Toppan failed to woo Elizabeth's husband, so she intentionally poisoned him to make him sick and nursed him back to health, hoping to earn his affection. When this failed, she attempted to blackmail him. When this also failed, he ordered her away from his home. At this time, authorities grew suspicious of the Davis family deaths occurring in such close proximity to each other. Suspicions of Toppan's murders had been floating around since the beginning of her career, and she was finally arrested arrested in 1901. Toppan showed no remorse for her crimes. Her motives were perplexing and never fully understood. Jane was said to get sexual excitement from her victims' demise and has gone on record saying that she wanted to murder more helpless people than any other woman that had ever lived. Even more than Jack the Ripper, who was also active during her murdering career. Jane was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sentenced to serve the rest of her life in an asylum in 1902 at age 48. In 1938, she died at age 84, often asking attending nurses if they wanted to grab some morphine and watch other patients die. Toppan's case is quite unique in that she did not seem to be financially motivated and received a genuine sexual gratification from her murders. Because of her happy, cheerful demeanor hiding her menacing intentions, Toppan dodged justice for almost 2 decades. Her final confirmed victim count is 31, but some believe it to be anywhere from 50 to the multiple hundreds. Toppan's life was the basis for the fictional serial murderer Bessie Denker in the 1954 novel and subsequent film adaptation, The Bad Seed.